Well, I must have left my headset on last week after the service because the batteries are dead. So we won't do that. But I don't know if you can run some batteries down to me, Ethan. That would be great. And we'll get that going here in a second. But I want to talk with you this morning on this topic of unity. And I've entitled this message for this morning, Dwelling in Unity. A story is told of two men riding together on a tandem bicycle. And they were ascending up this steep hill. And they finally got to the top. And when they made it to the top of the hill, the front rider said, "That was sure a tough ride." To which the man on the back said, "Sure was. And if I hadn't kept on the brake, we certainly would have went back down the hill." Of course, it always helps when you are working together with somebody. I imagine you've had that scenario. Sorry. You've had that scenario where you're trying to work with somebody on a project, and that project, you're doing one thing and they're doing another thing, and you think that everything is going well, and then you realize you're actually working in opposite directions with all that. All right, we're good, Ethan. Thank you, Pastor Matt. And we'll hopefully be up and running now with batteries. Maybe you've tried to help your kids with something, and you realize that they're doing something in the wrong direction, and it's not working out like you thought. The goal, of course, is to work together in unity, working in harmony one with another. And this morning, I want to take you to this psalm. It's just 3 verses, as we read earlier. I've entitled it Dwelling in Unity. And I would imagine that many of you are familiar with verse number 1. You've probably heard that verse quoted or spoken, that brethren dwell together in unity. Maybe you knew it was from Psalms. Maybe you didn't even know it was from Psalm 133. But you've heard that quoted. So we'll look at that first verse, and then we'll get to verses 2 and 3. And when you get to verses 2 and 3, and you start reading about ointment, or oil, as we'll see, running down the head and the beard of Aaron, what is that all about? And the dew descending on Hermon. And so we'll talk about that. I want to explain this psalm to the best that I can for you so that you can understand it. And then I want to at least talk about the theme that is in here of unity. And then in the end, I do want to make some specific application to our church as well as we move forward. So let's begin here this morning with the fact that unity is good, as it says there in verse number 1. And so again, looking there, behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Now, David begins by describing this with 2 adjectives. Now, we'll get to what he's describing in a moment, but a little grammar here, right? And so for you students that don't want to think about grammar, I apologize this morning, but I recall learning in school that adjectives are used to describe a person, place, or thing. I think that's what I recall from a definition. I should have looked that up to make sure, so I'm not telling you wrong information. But they're tied to a noun, right? They have some modification, and the 2 words here are good and pleasant. Now, I don't really feel that I need to spend a lengthy description of either of those because we understand those words well. But let me give you some brief thoughts here. Starting with something that is good, and that describes something desirable or something with favorable qualities, all right? Something that is good. Pleasant is something we could understand as something that is lovely or delightful. Now, we might use that term pleasant in regards to time spent with someone else. You might say, hey, we had a pleasant visit. It was a very pleasant time together. Maybe a pleasant meal we had with them. And by that, we mean that it was comfortable, conversation was enjoyable, it was a fulfilling time together. Now, good. Back to the good. Now, I can hear my English teacher saying, well, good is just a very simple adjective, right? And if I used good too many times in my paper, I can hear my English teacher circling it and telling me, you need to use more descriptive words, all right? That said, it's a very appropriate word here, and we use that term all the time, right? We use the word good. We might say, oh, I had a good day. We had a good trip. You might say afterwards, it was a good service this morning here at church. So we use that term all the time. Now, we haven't gotten to what it is yet, but we know that whatever it is, and I have said it a little bit here, but we know that whatever it is, someone would describe in a positive manner, something that brings joy, something good in its very nature. So now let's look at what it is. It says there in that text, verse number 1, brethren, to dwell together in unity. Let's start with that word, brethren. Now, brethren could mean a familial relationship, but it also could carry the idea of fellow countrymen. But what it points to is it points to a relationship that is had between individuals. Now, it says dwell together. Now, that word dwell together is used in different ways throughout the Old Testament. it can actually mean to sit down. For example, this word in the original is used when Moses sat down before the people in order to make judgments. And remember, he was judging all the people. They all came to him, and his father-in-law Jethro said, Moses, this isn't good. You need to get others involved. But the idea of to sit down, that word is used there, all right? And you can maybe get the sense of that. You sit down, all right, to be together. It can mean to inhabit, to dwell. Can mean to dwell like to live. And then it says in unity. And it gives us the idea here of community with cooperation, all right? Unity. Community with cooperation. And as David would pen this psalm, likely what he had in mind in the first thought here was that he was thinking about the nation of Israel, how they as a nation should live together in unity. Maybe even he is specifically referring to them coming together for some of their religious festivals where they would gather together and they would be in harmony one with another as they celebrated a festival. He sees that they would gather with a common purpose. And when they gather together, they might even sit together, right? Like the way we use that term. But they would dwell together. They were in harmony one with another. And he's saying when this happens, it is good and it is pleasant. I think beyond just coming together for festivals, which they would do, David would also have understood that unity among the nation of Israel, unity among the brethren there of Israel, was desirable at any and all times. Unfortunately, we can see in the Old Testament where the nation of Israel was not always united wholly together. For example, remember when Joshua and Caleb came back and they said, hey, we spied out the land. And there was 12 of them, and Joshua and Caleb said, we can go do this. But there was 10 of them that said, no way, they're bigger than us, we can't. They were not unified, right? There was 2 versus 10 in that case. Now you could say that 2 were unified and 10 were unified, but altogether they were not together in unity. And that led to 40 years in the wilderness because they didn't go in and take the promised land as they should have right away. I think we can also understand this principle and apply it to our current day as well, that it is good for believers, it is good for spiritual brethren, we could say, to dwell in unity, to live harmoniously. And then if we could get even more specific, for that characteristic, we desire it to be part of a local assembly of believers. And for us here, the brethren, those of us that meet right here at 1431 State Highway 29, all right, that's this address if you didn't know, right? That's okay, right? We just plug it into GPS and you pull up to Adirondack Baptist Church. I get that. It is a good thing that we dwell together in unity. But let's back up and in general talk for now about how good and how pleasant unity is. Unfortunately, we probably understand this from the opposite perspective. Anybody, for instance, ever experienced a lack of unity? Now, don't answer this, okay? But maybe a lack of unity amongst your family, okay? I'm speaking of your family now, right? Familial relations here. Whether immediate or in your extended family. Again, don't answer this. Has anybody ever experienced some disharmony, some disunity amongst your family? Now, I said don't answer this because I already know the answer, okay? Now, I wasn't around your dinner table last night, okay? I wasn't listening to your conversation recently, and I will not tell any stories this morning of your family should I happen to know them. But what I have found throughout the years of pastoring is that as I have gotten to know individuals and families, there has yet to be a single family that has said to me, my family just doesn't have any family problems at all. I've never heard that. I mean, Pastor, I just want to tell you, we get along great with all of our family. I get along great with my siblings. I get along great with my kids. I get along great with my parents. Hey, I even get along great with my in-laws, including my mother-in-law, okay? Now, there may be some people that get along well with some of those family relationships, okay? I had a little bit of fun there with you, but the point is that what I have heard from essentially every family I have ever gotten to know is that there is some level of disunity somewhere. And that's not to say I know about every situation in all the families here, okay? Maybe I haven't got to know you well enough, and eventually I will, but that's just been what I have experienced. The description usually tends to be more along the lines of, well, we had a family gathering, or the situation in my family is painful. It is discouraging. It makes family gatherings really uncomfortable, right? Many of you have probably felt really uncomfortable about going to Christmas dinner, maybe even last week with Easter. And I don't think I need to describe this further because I'm guessing everybody in here can easily understand disunity over something within your family. And let's understand that a lack of unity is part of life because of the sin nature that we all have. And let's be honest, we are part of the reason for the lack of disunity. We always want to point it to somebody else, but we have to take credit for it as well. We understand it in a family. Maybe you've also seen it at work. If you've listened to the news recently, and I don't encourage you to spend too much time on it, but if you've listened to the news over the last months, you can see great disunity in our country with the whole political system. Sadly, even too often within Bible-believing churches, there can be a lack of unity as well. But the psalmist here looks at this as a positive quality when one is united. So we've made a contrast which we can easily identify, but let's talk about this from a positive side this morning. When there is unity among brethren, the description is much different. When there is harmony among family, among believers, within a church, within a work situation, how could we describe it? Well, you can think about it for a second, and you could add to this, but we might describe a harmonious situation, a family that gets along well, as we might say it's peaceful, right? Life is calm, and there is a lack of noise in my soul. There is a lack of stress in my life because there is harmony and there is unity in our family. We might say when you gather with friends or families or brethren and they all are getting along well, we might say, a word we like to use, it's stress-free. Now, we maybe would like to have more stress-free situations than we have, but who wouldn't be for that, right, when there's harmony? Unity leads to positive and fulfilling interactions. Rather than a conversation that is tense, when two or more are agreed, you might walk away with a great sense of thinking, hey, we're on the same page about that, and that's encouraging. Unity in a job situation can lead to productiveness. Unity maybe within a church situation, or it could be others, but might lead to walls coming down between two people. Maybe that would be true within a family situation as well. Unity helps to increase our healthy concern for others in the struggles of life. Unity increases our joy. Unity leads to increased love among the brethren. Unity can cause thankfulness for others around you and can lead as you have this common purpose together. Experiencing a unified situation might cause you to want to spend more time with that individual or group of people as opposed to a disunified family situation, for instance, where you think, I don't ever want to go back to that family dinner. And you can think more on this if you want. I'm curious what else you could come up with. What else does unity cause? This is not an exhaustive list, just a few ideas I pulled together here this morning, but I think you can identify when you've had a unified situation, it's a positive thing. But let me finish with this one. Unity amongst believers pleases the Lord. I also want to give you a few thoughts here this morning. How can you promote unity? How can we as a church be unified? How can you be unified with others? Now, let me say this. Unity is a two-way street, right? If you've got that one belligerent person that is just not willing, I mean, it doesn't matter what you say. If you say it is, white, they have to say it's off-white. If you say it's this, they have to say that. I realize that. But how can we be unified together? Let me give you a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, unity requires that you have humility and not be self-centered. Right? The problem in a lot of situations is we tend to think about self. I'm guilty of that too, right? We're all guilty of that. We just think about self and what we want. And so it's all about me. And then it leads to disunity because the other person or the other people, they also are thinking about me, right? And when everybody's thinking about me, then typically we have selfish interest. We're more concerned about us, right? It's like the two kids that cut the piece of cake. And so they say, all right, you pick. And the kid always says, oh, that one's a little bit bigger. You take that one, I'll take this one, right? By the way, a solution we have in our home for that is we do it this way. You've probably heard this idea before, but if we have two kids that are going to split something, we say, listen, kid A is going to cut the cake, and kid B is going to pick the piece, all right? Let me tell you, that thing is cut right down the middle every time, okay? But again, we think about self. We're so consumed with me. And that leads to disunity, humility, right? And I tie humility in with this because humility is not thinking about self, right? It's not being concerned with me. It's being concerned with God first and foremost and being concerned with others, not about me, right? And we could talk a lot about humility, but humility is necessary in churches. It's necessary in homes. It's necessary in all different places so that we can maintain unity. How about this one? Another way that if we want to have unity, there must be forgiveness. Just remember that we are fallen people. As much as we might strive to honor the Lord and to respond correctly at all times, people respond in wrong ways. There can be a myriad of reasons for that. I'm not here to excuse it. I'm just saying maybe they didn't sleep well the night before and they're on edge. Maybe they haven't had their coffee yet and they're on edge, right? There can be a number of different reasons for all that, okay? People respond wrong, and we've got to be willing to forgive others, all right? A choice to release a wrong is a definition I've given here before, a willful choice to release a wrong. Forgiveness is necessary in a family, in a church, if we're going to have unity. One more I want to give you this is just focusing on what is important. Do you ever analyze what the debates are in your marriage? Don't share, okay? You ever said, boy, we had a disagreement over something so stupid, it's embarrassing, I don't even want to tell, right? All right, again, don't admit that you've done that, all right? Maybe within the family situation, you finally break these two kids apart, and what's the big problem, And you find out it's something really insignificant. Within churches, sometimes there can be true, legitimate doctrinal problems within a church that creates disunity within a church, but let's be honest, most of the times when there are problems within a church, it might be over some preferences, but oftentimes it can be over some things that aren't that significant. They really aren't that important. And so if we're going to have unity, we've got to focus on what is truly important. As believers, we are called to strive together for the sake of the gospel. Right? That is something that is important. We are called to live and honor the Lord. We are called to lift one another up, and yet we can allow disunity and things to creep in and pull us apart. And so we've got to keep in mind what things are truly important. And this is a really, really hard one for some people, but it's okay to just say, I'm just going to let it go. It really doesn't matter in the big picture. Okay, now I'm not saying we give up on doctrinal matters. That's not what I'm saying here. But there are times when it's okay, right? Husbands, it's okay that you might lose an argument in your marriage when it's not really that important, okay? It doesn't matter that the furniture needs to go there when you want it in a different place, all right? You get the drift, all right? And even within it, focus on what is truly important. Don't get too caught up and create disunity because of something not that important. Again, we could add to this list as well. I've just given you a couple of thoughts here today. But how wonderful it is to be united together. I think all of us would be more than happy to live in a state of unity. And much more could be added to this topic, but I want you to understand this verse and expand on it to begin with here. But having been given the truth in this verse, verse number 1, we now have two similes, we could say. I apologize for our students here this morning, all right? Similes. Back to our grammar class, usually those are kicked off with the words like or as, and you're going to see like or as here in the text. Unity is, notice verse number 2, it is like, all right, there we have it. It is like precious ointment, as it says here in verse number 2. Having told us how good it is to dwell in unity, he gives us the first simile. I think up until now, the psalm has been pretty easy to understand, but now we might ask, what about this ointment running down the beard of Aaron? What is up with that? Let me back up for just a moment. Aaron was the high priest in Israel, the first high priest. Now, a lot could be said about priests in the Old Testament, but let me just give you a couple of thoughts here, all right? You could do a whole study here. The origin of the priesthood leads back to when Moses anointed Aaron as the first high priest in Israel. Now, the role of the high priest was to represent Israel before the Lord. And they were involved in the sacrificial system which would atone for the sins of the people. That system is now abolished. I can't spend a lot of time on that, but understand they were part of that. In particular, only the high priest was to enter into the holiest place, or the Holy of Holies, which he did on the Day of Atonement. And he would enter into the Holy of Holies, and when he did so, he represented the people, the nation of Israel as a whole. Now, you can jot down Leviticus 8 if you want to read more about that here. I'm going to give you just one verse out of there, but you can read more about it there if you want. We won't spend time on that. But notice this in Leviticus 8, verse number 12. All right, and he, Moses, poured of the anointing oil upon Aaron's head and anointed him to sanctify him. So when Moses consecrated Aaron as the high priest, he took oil and he poured it on his head. All right, are you starting to see now where we're coming here in Psalm 133? And it says he poured the oil. And what we understand as we look at this psalm is that there must have been a fair amount of oil there. We're not told how much he poured on, because it ran down from his head, maybe down his forehead, down the side of his head, but it came down his face and into his beard, the beard of Aaron. But apparently it didn't all get stopped there. It went down even further. And so notice the end of the verse here in the King James. It says that went down to the skirts of his garments. Now, that word skirts may throw us off here for just a second. That word skirts really just means the idea of an opening If you have another translation, it might say collar. It might say something along those lines. The idea was that it went down his face, in his beard, and into around the collar area of him. All right, now we won't get too caught up in exactly all that, but that's the picture. But here's what I want you to understand. The pouring of oil represented the establishment of Aaron as the high priest, as the representative to God for the entire nation of Israel. In other words, the entire nation is united together and represented by him. And so this was a symbol of national unity. All right, so you can see, back to verse 1, unity, it's good, it's pleasant. It's like Aaron as he has this oil poured on his head, and we together are united there. So here David used something that was of significance to him, and the people of Israel would have understood it. By the way, let me also note this, that these people, the nation of Israel, they are united in a spiritual sense, or a spiritual way, we could say, through the priest who represented them to the Lord. All right, that's the first simile. Now, to me, that one is a little bit more easy to understand. This next one is a little more nebulous, all right? I'll do the best I can with you here on this one. But it says unity is as the dew of Hermon, all right? Or as the dew of Hermon. Okay, what does that mean? What exactly is David saying here? Well, let me give you a picture here, all right? That's a picture of what I understand to be Mount Hermon, all right? So I'll give you a little visual to look at here. That mountain was located, and it was a high mountain. Actually, Steve talked about Mexico City being high. This is 9,200 feet above the Mediterranean Sea, this Mount Hermon, okay? A big mountain. It's also located in the northern part of Palestine. And maybe you can see there a little bit at the very top. There's snow up there. These were mountains that would be snow-capped. So it says here, verse 3, as the dew of Hermon and as the dew that descended upon the mountains of Zion. All right, so we have the Hermon, but then we have Zion. Well, Zion is the mountain or the area in Jerusalem where the temple sat, but it's a long ways away from Mount Hermon. So what's the connection that he's making here? One commentator notes that you're talking about 200 kilometers apart, these two mountains. And then he talks about dew, heavy dew that descends in or on Hermon there. Exactly how does that tie to Zion is the question. Well, one suggestion for understanding here is that the dew symbolized something refreshing or invigorating for the vegetation. And as the dew fell on the mountain, so unity would bring refreshment. It would bring invigoration. It would bring vitality to the people. We understand, as I noted, that Mount Hermon would have snow on the top. It would melt, and the water would come down to the areas below. Zion was a much drier area. So if you were to have dew come down on Hermon, it would be refreshing for there. If you take that picture and you put it on Mount Zion, that dry area, that also would have been a refreshing picture as well. Exactly what David was trying to picture for us here physically is a tad bit of a mystery. If you can figure it all out, study it all out, that's great. But what is the general agreement here is that it is something desirable and it was something refreshing for the people. And as noted here at the end of the verse, for there the Lord commanded the blessing, even life forevermore, we once again see a link to the spiritual. It is a blessing from the Lord. And so I conclude from this that unity brings refreshment, especially in the midst of the chaos that we might often feel that we are in. How good, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell in unity. As I wrap this up for this morning, I preach this psalm today as a text that will exhort and encourage us towards unity. Again, I didn't really get into this. I hit on it quickly. I just want to say this does not mean that we unify over sinful matters or doctrinal error. There does need to be distinctions made for that, but that's not the point that we're getting at here this morning, a whole different matter. The point here is that it is a beautiful thing to see the people of God dwelling together in unity. And I preach this today not because I feel that we have a problem in our church with this. As a matter of fact, I don't know of disunity right now, which makes it easier to preach in a sense, right? Because if you know there's problems, you think, oh boy, who am I going to tick off today and create disunity with, all right? So I want you to see this as preventative. I also preach this today, and I want to make this more of a specific tie to our church, but we've made some announcements recently about the fact that we have a building committee that is beginning to assess the needs of our church and at least consider the possibility of expanding. As we were here last week, you know, it was just an absolute full house packed out in here, and we're fairly full again today. Working hand in hand with the expansion of our building is we're looking to clear the property up here. We've had the trees taken down, and Lord willing, within the next few weeks, the work is going to start for grading that area out. And one of my concerns as we move forward with whatever the Lord has for us is that we as a church remain unified. I want to do my very best to lead the church as we navigate through all of this, and I'm committed to doing that. We have grown as a church. We are considering the possibility of expansion. We believe the Lord has brought us to this point. But we also understand that there is an enemy. Satan is a roaring lion, right? Seeking whom he may devour. And he will not be thrilled about the fact that more people have come to church, new faces have showed up, people have gotten saved. Lord willing, we'll be baptizing a number here in just a few weeks. We also recognize, and I pointed this out earlier, that we have a sinful nature inside. We are prone to pride. We are prone to sin and contention. And I don't want division to creep in and cause a problem. So as preventative today, and as we think forward in all of this, I want to encourage us towards unity. Note that we have asked for suggestions. You probably have this figured out already, but I'll just remind you that we can't necessarily promise that we will take everybody's suggestion, okay? I know there are some young men that have stuffed that box with some ideas. I've heard this, okay? And I don't know, young men. We'll see what happens, but I'm not making promises. The committee is going to work with wisdom, and they're going to work and will eventually be presenting to our church what we're deciding and what we're thinking for there to be a vote and discussion and ongoing thoughts. But I want you to pray with me that the Lord would direct in anything we do. I'll say this again. I've said it many times. I don't want to get ahead of what the Lord is doing here at ABC, but I also don't want to be the reason why we're dragging back when the Lord has things for us to do. And I want us to be unified and experience something that is good and beautiful throughout this whole process. A.W. Tozer, in his book, Pursuit of God, gives an illustration in which he says, if 100 pianos are all tuned to the same tuning fork, I don't think the piano tuners use that so much anymore, okay? They have all electronic devices. But there's that little thing, and you whack it, and it makes a sound, all right? I think it's 440 pitch. Is that right? I don't remember now. Okay. I could be wrong on that. But if you tune all the pianos to the same tuning fork, all the pianos are going to be in tune. But the goal isn't to tune the pianos to each other, it's to tune them to the standard of the tuning fork. And I think that's a great picture. Our goal is to be in tune, first and foremost, with the Lord as a church. And if we're all in tune with the Lord, then I believe there will be unity amongst each other. But the goal isn't necessarily to be in tune with the person sitting next to you in the pew. The goal is to be in tune with the Lord and let unity happen as a result of that. By God's grace, would there continue to be unity amongst our church family? And I pray that you too will experience unity in your family situations, in your work situations, wherever it is. I realize you can't control everything, but how wonderful it is how beautiful, how good, how pleasant it is when brethren dwell together in unity. Shall we pray? Lord, we have gathered here this morning and we have talked about the topic of unity. And I pray that we would each do our part to remain unified one with another. And Lord, if we were to examine our own hearts here today and recognize that there is lack of unity and maybe we're the reason for it, I pray that we would be willing to make the changes necessary, the adjustments necessary in our life so that we can be unified. Lord, I would pray for this church family that as we move forward with whatever you have in the days, weeks, months, years ahead, that we would stay united with you first and foremost. And as a result, we would experience harmony, unity amongst this church family. Thank you for your incredible love for us. Thank you for your goodness to us. We have so much to rally around together. And maybe we be united together in the wonderful truths that we can stand upon through your word. And I pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Hey, my name's Pastor Matt, and I just want to say thank you for watching this Sunday morning's message. If you have any questions about what you heard, feel free to give us a call. Feel free to reach out to us on email or on our Facebook page. You also can get more information about the church at AdirondackBaptist.com. We hope to see you soon.